children.
What other kinds of activities did you get involved with while you were here in Wilmington?
When I got here, I was very soon enveloped into a lot of activities. I was on the board of Corrections for a while, and we found a number of problems in the correctional system.
What were some of those problems that you found?
Well, the same kinds of things you would find in almost any prison, except when you have a racist element to it, it seems to be more acute. We had a number of complaints from black prisoners who complained that their treatment was much harsher and that they never got justice within the system. So I think we conducted studies. Those are in print somewhere in the libraries,
really?
right?
Yes.
And I think that had some effect because eventually it ended up with the building of the prison at Smyrna, which improved things considerably.
What other organizations?
I was the first African-American in many things here. Yeah, I was involved with the Mental Health Association. First, I was president of what they call the Mental Health Chapter in Wilmington and Newcastle County. I was also the Delaware delegate to the National Board of Mental Health Association. You have to remember that at this time, the mental health movement was beginning to be important, to affect the schools. Programs in the schools were being revised to take into account mental health problems as they affected education. So the Mental Health Association and the school systems had a lot to do with that. A lot of things changed as a result of the mental health movement in the schools.
Desegregation was a hot issue here in Delaware. Did you see evidence of that stress hitting the children as a psychologist? Were children reacting to what was happening to them?
That whole interval was one of the most dynamic things that has taken place, perhaps in the history of this community and in the history of this country. The schools were totally segregated at first, but as black children became aware of things that were happening in the community, their own awareness increased, and they began aggressively to ask questions, to indicate that they were concerned, and to actually become quite militant in some areas eventually. I think the education of black children, especially the older black children, was very good for the movement as a whole. I don't think we expected that when desegregation came about, that it would be so widespread. I think we all anticipated that the Wilmington system would remain the same, that it didn't occur to too many people that the Wilmington system would, in effect, go out of business and be absorbed by the other districts. That created some havoc, a lot of anxiety that had to be dealt with, and in some occasions, some conflict situations. But yes, it was traumatic for black children, as it was for the community as a whole.
What kinds of things were you doing politically? What were you trying to accomplish?
The segregation problem was arising in the South and was getting critical. So I got involved with a group called Concerned Citizens. This is the group that spent so much time and newsprint boycotting the Rialto Theater, which was the last bastion of segregated theaters.
Yeah.
I found myself drawn into groups like the NAACP. I was on that board for a while, on the state board and on the Wilmington branch. There were other organizations other than the NAACP which were also active, and they were perhaps more integrated than the NAACP.
All right. What were some of those groups?
There was the Delaware Committee for Fair Practices, which was another major organization involving a lot of people, and eventually into what became the Delaware Leadership Council. It was an old group, there were more whites involved than blacks at the time, but they were aggressively looking for ways to bring about equality and doing a lot of educational work and coping with government officials and whatnot. They were very effective, I thought. As things began to get better, as the civil rights movement, after all the marching and whatnot, and things seemed to be moving in the right direction, it was felt that it was time for the movement to take on another, more politically oriented movement, and that was the creation of the Delaware Leadership Council, which was a kind of consortium of all of the major groups into one major effort to coalesce around the problems that would further the movement into the political sphere.
Dawn made my vow to the Lord, and
in order to keep the gains that were already made, we would have to be able to vote. And the voting registration among black people was very low. The main purpose then was first voter registration, voter education, and teaching how to split a ballot. It was very inclusive because we maintained a register of almost every organization in the black community, all the clubs, all the lodges, even the tiniest groups, all the social groups, so that we were able to raise voting registration in Wilmington, which is where the problem was. Actually, people downstate were voting in black people were voting in much greater numbers, percentage-wise,
Oh, really?
than in Wilmington. So our concentration was in Wilmington and mostly among the black neighborhoods. We developed a lot of leadership. A lot of people came up and were developed, and some of them are still in positions of influence in the community. It was very successful.
It sounds like something that you feel very proud of.
Absolutely.
Having been a member of.
We got a mayor out of it. We got a superintendent out of it. It was a lot of things happened, right, as a result of it.
Do you have any thoughts about your career here and your work, about your accomplishments?
We had another program called a failure prevention program. Instead of holding children back, you would give them enriched type programs so that they would be ready and would be able to cope. And you wouldn't first decide that there was something wrong with the child and not something wrong with the school. So that went on pretty well for a while. It was accepted by the board, and I understand it was the policy. Later, however, I found out that they had changed and had another kind of program which started out examining the children very early and decided that at an early age that the child was not ready for school. So he was delayed. So instead of failure prevention, I think we went into, deliberately finding children incapable too soon. One of the things I enjoyed was trying to discover not the mentally retarded, not the negatives, but discovering talent and giftedness among the children who were still in the segregated situation. And there were plenty of children there who could meet any criteria of giftedness. So we kept lists of those. We developed programs called enrichment programs, and the children were sent out to concerts and whatnot, and we had the art teachers involved and general discussions. It was wonderful for a while. But the important thing is that there in children, black children, white children, whatnot, there's much more potential than we actually see. And this was especially true in my experience with the children that I used to work with. I mean, if you give them a good environment and you give them opportunities to learn, opportunities to fail, opportunities to play, and just to be curious, they will develop at their own speed and be happy, right? And will not be discouraged by early failure or early condemnation and early discouragement. There are different ways of doing things, right? But educational systems have their ways, you know, and you can't really change them too rapidly.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm gonna tell you about the coming of the judgment.
Fare ye well, fare ye well.
I'm gonna tell you about the coming of the judgment.
Fare ye well, fare ye well.
There's a better day a coming.
Fare ye well, fare ye well.
There's a better day a coming.
Fare ye well, fare ye well. In that great getting up morning, fare ye well, fare ye well. In that great getting up morning, fare ye well, fare ye well. In that great getting up morning, fare ye well, fare ye well. In that great getting up morning, fare ye well, fare ye well.
Oh, preacher, fold your Bible.
Fare ye well, fare ye well.
Oh, preacher, fold your Bible.
Fare ye well, fare ye well.
For the last souls converted.
Fare ye well, fare ye well.
For the last souls converted.
Fare ye well, fare ye well. In that great getting up morning, fare ye well, fare ye well. In that great getting up morning, fare ye well.